Development camp opened today for the Montreal Canadiens. And for them, this isn't just some summer skate. It's the first real look at the next wave of talent coming through the organization. This is where they start to separate names from actual NHL possibilities. Because not everyone is going to play for the Montreal Canadiens. Not everyone is going to become a core piece. But this camp always matters because inside of this very roster, you have first round picks, second round picks, you have big centers, you have right shot defensemen, some intriguing goaltenders, you have some tryouts trying to force the organization to keep watching them, like Remy Jelena, and you also have a few players who could completely change the conversation around this Canadiens prospect pool. Today, we're going to go through the most intriguing names at Canadiens Development Camp, the players to watch, the storylines that matter, and what this camp can tell us about where this organization is heading. Because it's not just about skill, it's about projection, it's about habits, and it's about pace and compete. And for the Canadiens, it's about one very large question. Who actually is moving closer to becoming a future part in Montreal? So like always, let's talk some puck. Now, before we get started, I am going to ask you guys a question. Well, number one, I'm going to ask you to make sure that you hit the like button on this video, hype if you can, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure you hit the notification bell because all summer long there's going to be stuff coming from me in terms of roster moves, trades, evaluations of certain players, etc. Because all of that's hasn't been done yet. I'm still sitting on it because there's been so much news lately. Well, you want to be able to get through. The other thing I'm going to ask you guys, and I'm going to put it to you so that I don't waste anybody's time. Tomorrow, of course, is July 1st. And what does that mean? It's free agency day. So my question is this. Obviously, I don't think a lot of us think the Canadiens are going to do anything in free agency, to be very honest. But I'm going to ask you, the viewers, do you want me to do a live show tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a couple of hours covering what's gone on in free agency, what's missed, what players the Canadiens might have gotten live? Or do you want me to just sit back, let the day go by, and then do something at the end of the day? Let me know. You guys will decide, and I'll do whatever you think is best. But at the end of the day, one way or the other, I'm going to assess free agency day, whether it involves the Canadiens or whether it doesn't. Now, in terms of this episode, let's frame this properly. Development camp isn't a training camp. We got to stop thinking that. Nobody's winning an NHL job in June. Nobody's making the opening night roster because of one drill in development camp. That's not what this is. This camp is about gathering information. It's about measuring players against the organization's standards. How do they skate? How do they handle pace? How do they absorb coaching? And do they follow details? Are they stronger than they were last year? Are they quicker, more confident? Are they coming off as a little bit more professional? That's what the Canadiens are really looking for here. And for fans, this is where you start to get a clearer picture of the prospect pipeline. The Canadiens are still building. We know this. They still need centers. They still need right shot defense. They still need workable size that can play. And they need skill that can survive playoff hockey. And this camp roster touches all of those areas. So let's start where the attention has to start, and that's down the middle. The Canadiens' biggest organizational question has not changed for the better part of a decade. They need more high-end depth at center. That's why Michael Hage is the biggest name among the forwards at this camp. Mike's not just another prospect. He's a premium pick, a first-round center. And based on the roster, his production jumped off the page. At Michigan, he had 13 goals and 39 assists in 52 games. 52 points in 39 games, excuse me. And at the World Juniors, he led the way with 15 points in 7 games for Canada. That's really serious offensive production. But for Hage, this camp isn't about proving he has skill. We know that he does. The question about him is projection. Can he drive play? Can he play through contact? Can he attack the middle? Can he make plays at NHL pace? Can he become more than just a talented prospect? Because if Hage hits, the Canadiens' future down the middle looks very different. He's the type of player who can change the structure of this rebuild completely. Then, you have Hayden Papanikis. And Papanikis is fascinating, but for a completely different reason. He's 6'5". He's a center. He was a third-round pick in 2025, and in Kelowna, he put up 15 goals and 22 assists and 37 points in 57 games. Now, is he a finished product? No, not even close. But when you're 6'5" and you play center and you have some offensive touch, I think the organization is going to be patient with you. For Montreal, that's exactly the kind of player they want to develop properly. You don't rush him, you don't overhype him, you build his skating, you build his pace, and you build his details. Because if Papanicas becomes a reliable, big-bodied center, that's a very valuable commodity in your Canadiens organization. And then another guy you have up the middle, another important center in this group, is Logan Sawyer. And this is one guy that everybody's kind of forgotten about because you haven't really heard his name at all. He had 14 goals and 14 assists in 35 games at Providence. That's a very solid NCAA season. But with Sawyer, the question is whether he can become a legitimate two-way middle six option. Can he play with pace? Can he win battles? Can he support the puck? Can he be trusted away from the puck? This camp doesn't always create highlight reels for him, right? It's not about that. It's about his habits. It's about his maturity. And it's about whether he looks like a player who's trending towards professional hockey. And then, of course, there's last year's favorite. And that, of course, is LJ or John Mooney. Mooney's a completely different kind of profile, though, in terms of centers. He's 5'7", weighs 159 pounds, but he can play. At Minnesota, he had 7 goals and 23 assists in 34 games. So the skill is definitely there. But the other question is obvious. Can he survive against bigger and stronger players? Can he create separation? Does he have good use of his edges? Can he get inside enough? And can he turn from his size from being a limitation into a problem for defenders? That's what makes John very interesting. He's not going to win the eye test because of his size, right? But then again, we just let Brendan Gallagher go, and Gallagher wasn't a big guy, but dominant for his time, I would say. Mooney has to win it with pace, deception, touch, and a little bit of courage. Now, those are the center storylines for the Montreal Canadiens at this development camp. Hage is the headline, Papanicas is the size bet, Sawyer is the two-way projection, and Mooney is the size and pace wildcard. And together, they're one of the biggest reasons why this camp really matters for Montreal. Now, we have to move to the wing. And obviously, the first name that we're going to look at on the wing is Gleb Pugachev. I don't think anybody's going to remember his name, so we'll just call him Gleb for now until somebody pronounces it right. The Canadiens' 2026 first-round pick. Right wing, 6'2", 224 pounds. That's a serious frame. And that's what makes Pugachev interesting, is that he's already has a lot of experience across multiple levels in Russia. He's played in the KHL, the VHL, the MHL, and he's not coming in as a small, purely theoretical prospect. He's coming in with size, pro experience, and a power forward profile. Now, the key with Gleb is not just production, it's identity. Does he move well? Does he use his body? I think if you watch some of his highlights, you get the answer to that question. The other question, though, is does he protect pucks? Does he go to the net? Can he play heavy? And does he impose himself? Because if you're 6'2" and 224 pounds, the Canadiens need to see more than just flashes on the perimeter. They need to see a player who can become difficult to play against. That's the projection for him. And that's why he's one of the most important players in this camp. Another guy who's super important that we haven't seen yet is Alexander Zurovsky. He's one of the most exciting names on the entire roster. He had 16 goals and 26 assists in 59 KHL games. That's not junior production, and those aren't inflated numbers against kids. That's KHL production. And that matters, because when a young forward produces in a pro league like that, you have to pay attention. Zurovsky brings skill, he brings creativity and an offensive upside, and he gives the Canadiens another high-end winger with real offensive potential. This camp is important for him because it gives the organization a closer look at how his game translates in their environment. How does he respond to instruction? Can he handle the pace? How does he look physically? Can he be more than just a skilled offensive player? Can he become a complete NHL winger? That's the next step. Then there are the 2026 depth picks. Parker Trottier, Wesley Royston, and Tyler Diakos. Trottier is a U.S. National Development Program left winger. Diakos, he had strong production split between Waterloo and Drumheller. Royston, well, he brings size at 6'4" and a lot of penalty minutes, which tells you there's edge in his game. None of them are finished players. They're development bets. But they matter because teams are built with more than just first round picks. They need secondary hits. They need late picks who become NHL assets. They need players who bring identity. And at development camp, those are the players you watch for tools. Can Trottier skate? Can Diakos create offense? Can Royston play heavy without taking himself out of the structure? Those are the details. And that's where, these invites lie. Then, of course, there's one guy whose card I didn't do, and that's Thomas Russo. He's another one to watch. A local kid from St. Eustache, played for the Sherbrooke Phoenix, 22 goals, 30 assists, 52 points in 60 QMJHL games. It's interesting, but he's a long shot. If you let Josh Roy go, and he had very similar numbers, if not better, when he came over from the Phoenix, I mean, this is a long shot, to say the least, but it's exactly what development camp invitees are for. You bring them in, you compare them to other drafted players, and you see whether or not they belong. Sometimes a player forces the team to keep a door open. Other times, he closes it. And if there's one thing I'm going to talk about before we actually get to the right shot defense prospects that we have, is a kid that I mentioned off the top, and that's Remy Gelina. He's an invite to this camp. Now, Gelina, I know on a personal level because he spent 2 years with the Hawkesbury Hawks before going to Noranda to play in the QMJHL. And now, while Gelina has a lot of talent in terms of offensive skill, he's not the fastest. He's certainly not the most physical. And there's one trait that I don't like that I think the Montreal Canadiens may very well balk at. In the last 2 seasons that he was with Hawkesbury, there's always a game every year where the Central Canada Hockey League selects kind of an all-star team. They play like, sections of Team Canada at the junior A level, Canada East, Canada West, etc. And in both the seasons in Hawkesbury, Gelina was expecting to be picked for that team. The first year, that's 2020, 2023, 2024, if my memory serves, he didn't get selected for the team, and he jumped from the CCHL, left the Hawks, and went to the BCHL, which was at that time a rogue league. Played only a few games for both Nanaimo, and I forget what the other team was that he played for, but it really put the kibosh on him. The year after, he returned to the Hawks. They took him back in with open arms. He went through the season. Again, they went to select the players to go on the Canada East and West teams for the CCHL. And what happened? Gelina got selected, and then there was a modification. They added another player from Hawkesbury instead of Gelina, and that's when Gelina jumps to the QMJHL. That particular thing in both cases talks to me about his character in terms of who he is. The second year with the Hawks, he was actually named the captain. So for your captain to jump ship and go to the Q because he didn't get selected for an all-star team tells me that he's not the right guy for the Montreal Canadiens or any team in the National Hockey League. But that's my opinion. It may vary somewhere else, but I want all of you to know what I think of Remy Gelina. He's probably not going to come up in this development camp very much, but I got to tell you, from a character perspective, I didn't like what I saw at all. On the ice, no question. Other than the fact that he wasn't physical and didn't have a lot of speed. But in terms of character, not for me. Sorry. Now, let's get back to it. And we'll talk about the right shot defense, because this is one of the most important organizational themes things that are important for this organization, to put it a better way. They need more depth on the right side, and that goes without saying. So when we talk about depth, we start with Timothy Runso, their second round pick from this year's draft. Right shot D, 6'2", 194 pounds. With Victoria, the WHL, he had 11 goals and 33 assists in 68 games. That's a very interesting profile. He brings size, a right shot, production, mobility potential. And for Montreal, that's exactly the kind of defenseman that you want to develop. The question for Runso is how complete his game is. Can he defend hard? Can he move pucks under pressure? How does he handle retrievals? Can he make the first pass when forecheckers are coming in his face? Because offense from the blue line is valuable, but right shot defensemen only become NHL defensemen when they can survive the hard minutes. That's what the Canadiens need to evaluate. Then, of course, there's Bryce Pickford, who we talk about all the time. His numbers were absolutely outrageous. 45 goals, 38 assists, 83 points in 55 WHL games as a defenseman. That's the kind of stat line that makes everybody stop and take notice. Now, you have to be careful. Development isn't just about point totals, especially for defensemen. The question isn't, can he score in junior? Clearly, we know he can produce. The question is, can the game translate? Can he defend? Can he manage risk? Can he pick the right moments? Can he play within a structure? Can he become a power play weapon without becoming a defensive liability? That's the Pickford storyline. We know his offensive upside is real and the skill is there, but the pro projection depends on how the defensive details come along for him. Then there's Carlos Handel, right shot defenseman, 6 foot, 176 pounds, 22 points in 44 games with Halifax, and 4 assists in 5 games for Germany at the World Juniors. Handel's not the flashiest name on the roster, but he matters because the Canadiens need right shot depth defense, not just stars, but depth. Players who can skate and move pucks. They can make decisions and eventually maybe become useful pro pieces. And despite the fact that Handel is a defenseman from the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, where they get absolutely wallpapered in terms of offensive production against, his numbers are relatively decent for a team like the Halifax Moose Kids. So somebody you look at. Then there's Cooper Cleaves, 6'4", 205 pounds, right shot, playing at Dartmouth College. He's not there to be flashy. He's there because on the right side, that always gets attention. If he can show that he's got mobility, physical strength, and defensive awareness, he becomes worthy of tracking very closely. And you don't ignore Andrew McNeil either. A right shot defenseman, 6'2", 190 pounds, OHL experience with a physical edge. He's a later round player, but these are the types of prospects who can quietly build value if you develop them with a clear identity. So the right-hand defense group is very important. Runso's the headline, Pickford's the offensive wild card, Handel's the development piece, Cleve is the size profile, and McNeil is a physical depth bet. And for an organization that's been searching for more right-hand defense depth, this group deserves serious attention. Then on the left side, there are a couple of players that stand out for different reasons. Owen Protz and Braden Klimke. Protz is already under contract, and he's another one that I watched personally through my ties with the CCHL. He's 6'1", 207 pounds, and he had 23 points in 64 games with Brantford. But the number that jumps out at everybody is 84 penalty minutes. That tells you that there's bite and physicality and edge, and all that matters. Protz hits like a trunk, and the Canadiens need players who can defend with authority, not reckless hockey, not chasing hits, but hard playoff-style defending. Can Protz become that type of player? That's the kind of thing that you're going to want to watch. Can he close gaps? Does he separate players from pucks? Does he play hard below the dots? Does he make simple, clean exits? That's the path for him. And it's an important one because during last season's development camp and the preseason, he impressed people. So this camp for him is going to be extremely important. And then there's Braden Klimke. Different player, smaller defenseman at 5'11" and 174 pounds, but he had 4 goals and 43 assists in 68 games with the Saskatoon Blades. That's a puck-moving profile. The question is whether the skating, decision-making, and defensive play are strong enough to translate. Klimke has to show that he has more than just a junior playoff producer in him. He has to show he's got control and poise. He needs to show that he can run an offense without cheating the game. That's what makes him one of the more interesting names outside of the obvious top group. Now, when it comes to the goaltenders, I didn't make player cards. There's way too much information when it comes to stats on goaltenders. But in this camp, there are 6 of them. And there are a few names that deserve a lot of attention. And that starts with Alexis Cournoyer, playing at Cornell. 6'4", 199 pounds. He had an 18-10 record, 205 goals against with a .915 save percentage. For a kid at Cornell, that's a really strong season. For Cournoyer, the appeal is size plus results. He gives the organization a real goaltending development project with encouraging numbers. Then there's Quentin Miller. He was at camp last year. Montreal-born, playing at the University of Denver. 25 games, 12-10-2 record, 2.39 goals against average, .916 save percentage, 3 shutouts. Another strong profile. For Miller, the camp is important because he's been in the system longer. He isn't somebody who's brand new. The organization wants to see progression on his part. Is he sharper, more controlled? Is he tracking the puck better? Is he managing his rebounds? And is he giving off the presence of a goalie who is moving forward? All those things matter. Then you have Emmett Croteau playing at Dartmouth. 15-5-4 with a 193 goals against and 922 save percentage. Those are excellent numbers. But because he's older, the question becomes more about timing. Is there a pro path? Can he push his way into the conversation? Can he make the Canadiens think that there's more here than just a depth goaltender? That's what development camp starts to answer for the Canadiens. Then there's Arsenii Radkov, their 2025 third round pick. The numbers for him are a lot tougher because he's young, and he's big, and goalies develop a little bit differently. With Radkov, you're not looking for perfection. You're looking for tools: size, movement, compete, mental reset. Can he recover from a bad goal? Is he battling through screens? Can he hold his structure? That's the evaluation. The Canadiens' goalie pipeline has become extremely interesting. Look at all the names: Cournoyer, Miller, Croteau, Radkov, Mikas Vixvagens, Max Lacroix. There's a competition here, and competition is healthy, but goalie development can be a little unpredictable. The more legitimate bets you have, the better your odds are. Now, what should Montreal Canadiens fans actually watch for during development camp? Well, listen, don't just look at goals, don't look at highlights, and don't look at who's scoring in a red and white scrimmage. You have to watch pace. The practices are more important. You have to look fast and see who's playing without looking rushed. Watch the details. Who stops on pucks? Who wins second efforts? Who tracks back? Who supports teammates? You watch body language. Which player looks confident? Who looks like he's absorbing what the coaches are telling him? And who competes when the drill gets really hard to do? You keep an eye on the centers, because Hage, Papanikis, Sawyer, Mooney, and Merrill, that group matters in the future of this organization. You watch the right shot defense, because Runso, Pickford, Handel, Cleaves, and McNeil, that's a major organizational need. You also watch the goaltenders, because Miller, Cornway, Croteau, and Radkov are all at different stages of their development, but they all have something to prove. And then you watch the invites, because every year there are players who come into camp with no guarantees and leave with the organization paying much closer attention. That's the beauty of development camp, not the final judgment. It's a checkpoint, and checkpoints all matter. So here's the bottom line. This Canadiens development camp isn't just about prospects skating in the summer. It's about the next layer of the rebuild. Michael Hage is obviously the headline because the Canadiens need high-end centers. Gleb Pugachev, I got his name right, who is a new first-round power winger everyone wants to see, especially after you say you'd bury somebody like Tom Wilson. Alexander Zurovsky may be one of the most skilled players in the entire Canadian system. Bryce Pickford may be the most explosive offensive defenseman since Lane Hudson. Timothy Runso could be a key right shot defense prospect. And the goalie group, that has real internal competition. That's what makes this camp interesting. Not every player here is going to become a Montreal Canadien. Let's be clear. But some of them are going to shape the future conversation. And this week, you get your first look, in some cases your second, at who's taking a step forward. So the Canadiens need to ask questions of their fans. And so the question to Canadiens fans is very simple. Who are you going to be watching the closest? Hage, Pugachev, Zurovsky, Pickford, Runso, one of the goalies? No wrong answers here, so drop them in the comments. And if you want full Canadiens prospect coverage throughout development camp, the draft aftermath, of course, and the road to the rookie camp, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the next wave is already here. Now, we find out who is actually ready to move closer to Montreal. Now, here's one more thing I want to leave with you. And I wanted to leave it right at the end so that you guys can all watch the video till the very end. But anyway, there's a lot of talk going on. A lot of it has to go around the Columbus Blue Jackets, whether it's Kirill Marchenko, Zach Werenski, Boone Jenner. Listen, guys, don't overthink this. There are a lot of people throwing shit at the wall here because they're hearing stuff from organizations that are trying to generate interest. We saw it happen 2 years in a row with Pierre-Luc Dubois. Don't get caught up in the hype. Wait for something real to come out. I've heard that the Canadiens made an offer doesn't mean that the Canadiens made an offer. It means that somebody wants you to think they did. Until such time as a deal happens, discuss it if you have details. See whether or not it makes sense. But don't try to make things up as you go along. I'm not going to do that to you, okay? I want you guys to keep an open mind and think to yourself, free agency might not be where the Canadiens go. They may very well go through the trade market because they've got assets that they can move. So let's be patient and see what happens. And if I do find out something, I'll be the first to tell you. As always, thanks for watching and keep your skates down, sticks on the ice. Go Habs, go.